Okay, good evening everyone. Sorry for the delay. We had a hard time getting connected here. Okay, firstly, usually we ask people to introduce themselves. We'll skip that today because we want to get right into it. We just ask if you could kindly turn your screens on unless you're currently in prison. Then you could keep it off. Thank you very much. Okay, we're starting now. We're learning Siman Tzadiches, Seif, Beis. Siman Tzadiches, Seif, Beis. Yes, last week we learned that the Mechaber seems to hold like Rabbeinu Tam, that Tam Ke'ikar. Tam Ke'ikar of D'oraisa means that if there's a taste transfer, that taste that transfers into something that's less than 60 is going to be Asr D'oraisa, as if the taste is clear and present. And yet the Mechaber said that we could trust the Gentile, we could trust an Oved Kacham Azoles to say that he does or does not taste any Isser, even if there isn't 60. So last week we dealt with the question that if Tam Ke'ikar is D'oraisa, how could we rely on Oved Kachavim, who is Mesiach Lefi Tumai? Yeah, Abi likes Mesiach Lefi Tumai. And that's what we discussed last week, 5 different approaches. Now we're going to get into various Taaruvos. We're going to discuss various mixtures. Last week we alluded to the fact that when Isser falls into Heter, you're always going to need Shishim. However, there's a difference between whether Isser falls into Minoi or Isser falls into Einoi Minoi. When Isser falls into Minoi, then you need Shishim, but you only need Shishim Midrabanan. But if Isser falls into Einoi Minoi, so if going to Einoi Minoi, there's literally a taste transfer, then it's a D'oraisa, then you need 60 Midoraisa, because you need to nullify the taste. You need the taste to, so to speak, diffuse to such an extent that it's no longer discernible. So min b'minoi, you need 60 midrabanan. Min be'enoi minoi, you need shishim midoraisa. There is a shita that we haven't really mentioned, and that is the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds, the Amoira Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbi Yehuda holds that min b'minoi is b'mashehu, is never batal. In other words, we hold min b'minoi is more lenient. Rabbi Yehuda holds min b'minoi is more strict. Min b'minoi is not batal. The idea being that when you have two similar tastes, they strengthen each other, and therefore it's much harder for it to become batal. We'll get more into that in Siman Kuf Beis by the dinim of Davar Sheish Lai Matirun. Okay? Just bear in mind, there is a shita of Rabbi Yehuda that min b'minoi is not batal. So the first case the Mechaber discusses in Seif Beis is if Isser mixes into Heter min b'minoi, and what happens is it gets poured out, so there's no way to determine whether there's shishim or not. Nobody in the world, not Albert Einstein, cannot figure out whether you got shishim over here because it spilled down the drain. But you know there was roiv. Now, if right now, after it spills out, you have no idea if there was ever a roiv, then you have to be machmer, because if you don't know if there was roiv, then it's a suffix d'oraisa. Because if there wasn't roiv heter, and you're not sure, was there roiv heter, was there not roiv heter, it's a suffix d'oraisa l'chumra. However, if you know there was a roiv, but you're not sure if it's shishim, and shisha, the requirement of shishim by min b'mino is d'rabanan, so then we could say suffix d'rabanan l'kula. Okay, that's the first halacha of the Mechaber. Im nisarev min b'minoi. If Isser got mixed into Heter b'minoi, Isser got mixed in Heter b'minoi, v'nishbach, and it got poured out, v'inyan, in a way she'ein yecholen lamoid olav l'sharoi, that you have no way to evaluate and to estimate. Im noida shehuruba, if you know that there was roiv Heter, then mutter, then it's mutter. In other words, if you don't know that there was roiv, so then then it's a suffix d'oraisa. But if you know it was roiv heter, and you don't know if it was shishim, it's mutter. If you didn't know that it was roiv heter, it's asr. Let's see the Taz. The Taz in Sivkata and Gimel says out the logic here very succinctly, very briefly. The Taz says, Hamaskana b'pais, give the maskana among the authorities is the min shenesarev b'minoi minat Torah bato b'rayv ba'alma. That min, one species that got mixed into the same species. We'll see in the Rama, how do you define min b'minoi, min b'sheinu min? What's the definition? But if it's min b'minoi, batal b'roiv ba'alma. It's batal in a roiv. Shenemar acharei rabim lahatois. You follow the roiv. You follow the roiv. Ela d'rabbanon atzru chabei shishim. The rabbis required 60. Al kain b'makam sheish safek. In a situation where there's a safek, kagoin zeh, for example, this case, shenishbach, where it got poured out, then azlinon lekula, we're lenient. V'amrinon, we say shahaya shishim. There probably was 60. Avol b'min b'sheinoi minoi, if it was 1 min in a different species, for example, you have, let's say, chelev, forbidden fats, in some kind of milk, or some kind of meat that tastes differently, then tzarich shishim and atar, then you need 60 midaraisa. Kivan, why? What's the main difference between min b'minoi, min b'she'eno minoi? The main difference is the taste. Min b'minoi, it's just Isser is coming into the heter, but there's no discernible taste because they have the same taste. But min b'she'enoi minoi, tzarich shishim Torah kivan shemargishin beheter tam Isser, since you can detect the tam of the Isser, al kain, therefore b'makam safek, when you have a doubt, azlinon l'chumra. Okay, I'm going to skip this Ramah just for momentarily, because we're going to go to the next din of the Mechaber. We'll come back to the Ramah in a moment. Avol em nesarev b'she'enoi minoi, but if Isser got mixed into a different species, v'nishbach, and it got poured out, be'inyan she'en yichol lamed olav, in a way that you cannot determine, l'sharoi, to evaluate whether there was 60 or not, so you know for sure there was roiv, but you don't know if it's 60. Afilu noida shahaya ruba, even if you know there was roiv, ruba heter aser. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. However, the Ramah throws in a curveball she'en kamayo. Okay, says Ramah, what's the definition of min b'minai? Now, but let's get some background on this Ramah. The Gemara brings the machlekes Abaye and Rava. That Gemara happens to be talking about yayin nesach that gets poured into regular yayin. What is min b'minoi? What is min b'she'enoi minoi? Rava says, we go basar, the shame. It all goes by the name. So wine and wine, even if one is yayin nesach and one is regular wine, it's the same name, it's min b'minoi. And if it has different names, it's min b'she'enoi minoi. In other words, Rava says we don't care about flavor. We care about the name. Rava's opinion in the Gemara is we care about the shame, we don't care about the tam. Abaye says no. Abaye says the definition of min b'minoi, min b'she'enoi minoi, is if it has the same taste, then it's considered min b'minoi. If it has a different taste, then it's min b'she'enoi minoi. What would an example be of same taste or a different taste? Let's say, you have chometz that comes from wine, or chometz that comes from beer. Okay, there's different kinds of vinegar. You could have chometz yayin, or you could have chometz shechar. So they're both considered chometz, but they have a different taste. Okay, they have the same shame, but a different taste. So do you follow the name of what it's called, or do you follow the taste? Rava says, chometz yayin, chometz shechar, it's all the same, it's min b'minoi. But it has different flavor, we don't care about flavor. Abaye says, no, it has a different flavor, so if it has the same, we don't care about the name, we care about the flavor. So Rava says shame, Abaye says flavor. Who knows? When you have a machlokes Abaye and Rava, who do we paskin like? We always paskin like Rava, except for Yal Kagam, except for those 6 cases. And by the way, it's a good thing that Rava was rescued in this week's Parsha. You know that Rizal says that when Avram Avinu went to save Lot. Vayikach es Lot ve'es Rechushai ben Achi Avraham. Rechushai ben Achi is Rava. Rava's neshama was in Lot. That's why Avraham went to rescue him. because we pass like Rava, Avram has to get Rava. So since we pass like Rava, you would expect that the definition of min b'minoi, min b'she'enoi minoi is shame like Rava and not flavor, which Abaye says. And that's how the Rama paskins. The Rama looks at the Gemara. The Gemara says that Rava says that when wine falls into wine, we go by shame, we don't go by flavor, and therefore the barometer of determining min b'minoi, min b'she'enoi minoi is shame and not tam. Therefore the Rama comes and the Rama paskins like Shitas Rava. Take a look in the Rama. Ula inyan min b'minoi, azlinan basar shma. We go by the name. Imhu shava, if it has the same name, have a min b'minoi, then it's considered the same species. Avaloi azlinan basar taima. We don't follow the taste. Imhu shava imloi, whether it's the same taste or not. And as we're going to see, the Shach fundamentally disagrees with Rama's definition of min b'minoi, min b'she'enoi minoi. The Shach, let's take a look in the Shach Siv Katan Vav. The Shach says, why do we say that by min b'minoi it's suffik d'Rabbanan and min b'she'enoi minoi it's a suffik d'Oraisa? Why is it by min b'minoi if you don't know if there's shishim, then you could be lenient? Min b'she'enoi minoi, if you don't know if there's shishim, you could be machmer. Why? Why is min b'minoi suffik d'Rabbanan and min b'she'enoi minoi suffik d'Oraisa? The Shach says because the reasoning is like Rabbeinu Tam. Hatam kasa Rabbeinu Tamam and the Shach Siv Katan Vav. V'chol ha'poskim ha'imdim b'shitasai. And all the Rishonim that hold like Rabbeinu Tam. The Kaimelan Tam ke'ikr aser midairaisa b'min b'she'enoi minoi. Tam ke'ikr is an iser dairaisa by min b'she'enoi minoi. Why? The kivan shenois. And now look very carefully at these words because we're coming to our first Rabbi Kiva Eger of the night. Because tonight, people are not happy we didn't start exactly at 8 o'clock. You'll take it up with Verizon, but to make it up, we're going to do multiple Rabbi Kiva Egers, okay? The kivan shenoisein ha'isser tam beheter, since the isser gives flavor to the heter, nepach ha'heter liyos kula isser, the heter is transformed into something which is entirely isser. So when you have a davar aser that gets mixed into einoi minoi, and you don't have shishim, so the whole heter is transformed into isser, v'aser kula midaraisa. Rabbi Kiva Eger points out that the language of the Shach is way too dramatic over here. Too much drama here. Who asked the Shach to say that when isser falls into heter, the nepach ha-heter liyos isser? Who cares? It doesn't have to. We don't have to say the whole thing is transformed into isser. The point is that when isser falls into heter, we're margish the tam of the isser. We detect it and it's not batal. You don't have to say all of the heter is transformed. In other words, let's say a kazayis of isser falls into 50 kazasim of heter. You don't have to say it's transformed into 50 kazasim of isser. It's just we detect the kazayis of flavor of isser and it's not batal. You don't need this fancy lumdus. In fact, Rabbi Kiva Eger says that Rabbeinu Tam and the Ri happen to hold that if a kazayis falls into 4 eggs of heter, then we don't use the lumdus of nepach le'isser. But it's irrelevant. We don't need that lumdus. The point is, it's not batal. You don't have to say that it's transformed into isser in order to say something's not batal. It's just not batal. You don't need that fancy lumdus. So Rabbi Kiva Eger calls it sfas yeser. The wording of the Shach is excessively dramatic over here. He didn't need to come on to that, okay? Which is very interesting, because if you look in the Bergoila, Sivka Evav, the Bergoila is very brief, right? He usually just says Mara Mekaimais. He doesn't give logic. He happens to chime in. By the way, you know what the pshat in the Mechaber is? That when min falls into Einoi Minoi, Nepach HaHeter Liyos Kula Yisser. So you imagine, he didn't have to say anything. Instead, he chose the dramatic words of the Shach, which Rabbi Kiva Eger says is not even necessary. Okay. Anyway, the Shach continues, Avol min b'minoi, when min falls into minoi, kivan she'eno noisim by tam, it's not giving any flavor. Bato min ha-Torah b'roiv, it's bato b'roiv k'dich savach Rab mahatos. Elo shachachamim hitzrichu samach. The rabbis required 60. V'hilkach, therefore, kivan shenoida shahaya rubai heter, since it was known that it was roiv heter, v'loy nistapik ela im yesh sham samach oylav. You're only mesupik if there's 60 or not. Havalei sveika d'rabanan ulakula. It's a suffix d'rabanan ulakula. Masha'in kain, however, if you don't know if there was ever a roiv, tahavale suffix dairaisa, where if you don't know if there was ever a roiv, then it reverts back to being a suffix dairaisa. V'aser avomin b'she'enoi minoi. Kivan the aser min Torah ad samach, since it's biblically aser until you have 60. Why? Kivan shenoi sein tam, since it gives a flavor. Afilu noida shahaya rubai heter. Even if you know it was roiv heter, v'lai noida shahaya samach, and you don't know it was 60. Havale sveika dairaisa the aser. Okay, that's exactly what the Taz said, and that's how the Shach sets it up. But now the Shach comes in with the $1 million question of the night. Therefore, if the main nekuda of difference between min b'minoi and min b'sheinoi minoi is min b'sheinoi minoi is dairaisa because it gives flavor, and min b'minoi is only drabanan because you only need 60 midrabanan, but it's not really giving flavor, then where in the world does the Rama come off defining that min b'minoi and min b'sheinoi minoi goes by the name and not by the flavor? The whole point is the flavor, not the name. Nobody would say that it's worse if we have different names, but if we have the same name, then it's better. We don't. Who cares about the name? It's all about taste transfer. Ubiyois kain. Since this is so, says the Shach, T'mihani amashikasav arav, I am astonished by what the Rama says, that le'inyan min b'minai, we go by the same name, which means, think about it, the daiter, that means the opinion of the Rama is, im hu shava b'shma, if it has the same name, even though it has different tastes, afagav d'loi shava taima, havalei min b'minai, and it's only aser midrabanan. And if you're masupik, if there's 60, we'd be lenient. Vim einoi shava b'shma, and if it doesn't have the same name, afagav the shava b'taima, that's min b'sheinoi minoi, and it's also min Torah. And by the way, the Marshal agrees with the Rama. And by the way, the Nesivos and the Chavos Das agrees with the Rama. But v'harei mavor mikol haposkim, but it's clear from all the poskim, b'min b'sheinoi minoi aser min Torah ad shishim, that the reason why min b'sheinoi minoi is Asr min Torah until you have 60 is why? Because it has a different name? No, it's because it gives flavor. Kiven the noisein tam. Ulahachi, therefore, min b'minoi the eno noisein tam is batu min Torah barav. Kidaz linan b'chol duchti basaruba. V'im kain, says the Shach, nahapoichu. It's pink fakert. It's just the opposite from what the Rama says. Name is irrelevant. It's all dependent on taste. Hakol azlinan basar taima. The halach is we follow the taste. Dim einoi shava b'taima, if it has a different flavor. Afagav the shavar b'shma, even though it has the same name. Mikal makam kiven the nois in tam heter, since it's giving flavor. V'nepach heter lio is kula yisr, and the heter is completely transformed to isr. Again, he's getting dramatic with this lamdus. You don't need to say that. It's only because it's discernible. Kula isr. The heter is transformed into entirely Isser Asr min Torah Shishim, and therefore v'hilkach b'nishbach, if it gets poured out azlinan l'chumra, will be machmer. V'im shava b'taima, if it has the same taste, af agav d'loi shava b'shma, even though it has a different name, mikol makom kiven d'loi yav taima, since it's not giving taste, batu min Torah. Ukidazlinan b'chol tachti basaruva k'dachsiv achrei rabim lahatois. Therefore, so the Taz, the Shach has two words to say to Rama. It's pink fakir, it's just the opposite. The Rama is making it contingent on, what do you call it? Do you call the Yisr a different name than the Heter? The Shach says call whatever you want. Call it even late to supper. But the point is, does it give taste or does it not give taste? If it gives taste, then we're dealing with an Issa D'Oraisa, and if it gets spilled out, and you're not sure if there were 60, we'll have to be Machmer. If it's the same flavor and a different name, and it gets poured out, and we don't know if they're Shishim, then we could be lenient.
So how does the Shach explain that we're not moving like robots?
So Avi, even though he missed the first year live, but he heard it this morning, and I know he did a good job hearing it. Avi wants to know.
Watched it.
You have to be careful if you're going to speak up, you know? You never know what's going to happen. Especially I'm like under pressure over here with the start over here, okay? The Afagav, so the Shach wants to know, with all this good logic that we're asking on the Ramah, that what's Ramah saying? It should be dependent on flavor, but the Gemara says that Rava's opinion is we go by flavor. We go by name. We go by shame. We go by the name. So how could we not paskin like Rava? The Ramah is solid. Don't ask on the Ramah. It's not the Ramah's problem. It's the Gemara's problem. So the Shach asked that question. Avi v'afagav the kaimelon karava. Even though we passing like Rava, in where Masech Avodah Zarah Daf Samach Vav Gabe Chavra Chadata Azlinan Basar Shma. By wine we go by name V'loy Basar Tainma Le'inyan Min B'minai. And here is where the Shach says a Ga'oinus Atzum V'noira. Says the Shach, I'm not arguing on Rava. What Abaye and Rava say in Masech Avodah Zarah is not relevant to Yoredei Siman Tzadi Chesef Beis. Abaye and Rava are talking about isurim that are not asur because of taste. For example, yayin nesech. In order to be mevatel yayin nesech, what's the halacha? How much heter do you need to be mevatel yayin nesech? Anybody know? Anybody in the yayin nesech business? How are you mevatel yayin nesech? How much heter do you need to be mevatel yayin nesech? Very good. Who's that?
Ari Grunberger.
Ari Grunberger. Where are you?
In Brooklyn.
Wow. Ari Grunberger in Brooklyn is saying that yayin nesech is not batal, it's asur b'mashehu. So think about it. If yayin nesech is asur b'mashehu, is the reason why it's asur because it gives flavor? It's not because it gives flavor, because even if you have 100 against it, it's not batal. Even if you have 1,000 against it, it's not batal. But it's not giving flavor. The answer is it's a gezeras hakosov. It's a gezeras hakosov that yayin nesech is not batal. However, that's only when you have min b'she'enoi minoi. In other words, that's a din by min b'minai. The din that yayin nesech is not batal is by min b'minai yayin nesech is not batal. So there, it's not dependent on flavor, because even if you have enough to nullify and diffuse the flavor that you can't discern it, it's still asur. So by isurim, that their isur is not contingent on flavor, then the definition of min b'minai, min b'she'enoi minai is not dependent on taste, it's dependent on name. Then we say, if it has the same name, it's min b'minoi and it's not batal. If it has a different name, it's min b'she'enoi minoi and it is batal. Okay? Why? Why do we say it's dependent on name and not flavor? Because the isur of yayin nesech has no connection to flavor, is not a factor in the isur of yayin nesech. So now what we're going to learn is the machloikes Abaye and Rava of how do you define min b'mino, min b'she'eno minor are by isurim that are not connected to taste transfer. What are some examples of that? Tevel is also not batal, even be'elef. V'tevel, shasurim b'mashehu, min b'minoi. That even the slightest bit of tevel, min b'minoi, asers the whole mixture. Or truma. Anybody know how much do you need to be mevatel truma? Very good, Rabavi. 100. Truma is batal in 100. Now, is truma aser a mixture because it gives flavor? Obviously not, because then it would only aser up to 60. The fact that it asers up to 100 means it's not aser because of flavor, it's aser because of exeris hakosov by min b'minoi. Or arla, how much does arla require? 200. So again, it's not dependent on flavor. So yayin nesech, tevel, which are aser b'mashu, or truma, or arla, shiurim l'mala mishishim, the shiur is more than 60, b'minoi, only by minai. Then we'll say v'ilkach imushave b'shma, if it has the same name, af agav d'loi shave b'tama, havalei min b'minai v'aser b'mashehu, or b'kof aleph, or v'reishalf, 101, 201. V'meino shave b'shama, if it doesn't have the same name, af agav the shave b'taima, even though it has the same taste, then it's only Asr up to 60. Okay? So by Isurim, that their fundamental Isser is not contingent upon taste transfer, and where it Asrs by Min B'minoi, the definition of Min B'minoi is the name, not the taste. Or likewise, and remember we started off the shir saying, the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda is that Min B'minoi is never batal. So in the world of Rabbi Yehuda, that Min B'minoi is never batal, how do you define Min B'minoi or Min B'sheinoi minoi? It's machlokes Abaye and Rava. Abaye says it goes by taste. Rava says it goes by name. And we paskin, of course, like Rava, that it goes by name. Yeah? But in Siman Sadiches, we're not talking about Isurim that are not connected to taste transfer. We're talking about taste transfer. When it comes to taste transfer, even Rava would agree to Abaye that it's dependent on taste and not name. So we always paskin like Rava. The Shach is saying the Ramah misapplied the machlokes Abaye v'Rava to Siman Sadiches. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah on Daf Samach Vav is not relevant to Siman Sadiches, the Shach argues. The Gemara is talking about Isurim that are Asr Min B'minai when it's not dependent on taste transfer. Tevel, Yayin Nesech, which are Asr B'mashu, Truma, which is Asr in 1 in 100, Arla, which is Asr 1 in 200.
So what difference does it make Min B'mino or Min B'sheina Mino by those kind of shiurim?
There, it seems like it's a gezeras hakasav, that when something is Min B'minoi, it can't become batal. Why? There's also a counter logic that two things that are the same, they don't cancel out, they just strengthen each other. So Abaye says, what is it about commonality that strengthens? Abaye says, it's the taste. Rava says, not the taste. It's what its essence is, which is determined by its name. And we paskin like Rava.
Here, because here the Shach is saying that the only svara could be, it must be because of taste. Well, why else would there be a distinction? But they're obviously there. There's some other reason.
Because
if you're like that svara, then hold that here too.
Because there, you're dealing with like a choik, you're dealing with like a gzeres hakasav.
It says it in the Torah, Min B'mino Sheina.
Yeah, but yes, it's gzeres hakasav. We learn it out from V'lakach midam haparu midam hasoyer. Yeah, I think we have it in Siman Kuf Beis. Yeah, it's basically gzeres hakasav.
And it's
so,
only by those kind of.
and the question is it because it tastes the same, or because the Torah calls them both dam? So they were like, we're analyzing, like, what is it about the Min B'minoi that it doesn't become batal? Okay.
What does the Shach mean over here when he says, then Einay Shavra B'Shma, Afagat B'Shavra B'Taima, also B'Nois and Tap. But it's not nice and top.
Okay, good. Good, Ha'ara. He means it is nice and tam, you just can't taste it. If something has the same taste, if Isser falls into Heter and they taste the same, the Isser is giving taste to the Heter. It's just not a discernible taste because both items taste identical. So there it would be Asr, Lu Yitzur, you developed your tongue to taste Isser and Heter, it would be Asr up to 60. You're right. Biologically, physiologically, you can taste the difference, but it is nice same time. It's indiscernible. Okay, let's skip down a litit.
1 second. When he says nice and time, does he mean 60, or is that just not relevant?
Yeah, he does mean 60. In other words, by let's say yayin nesach or those things min b'she'enoi minoi, then maybe it would be batal. It could be mutter if it's 60, theoretically. Yeah.
The whole concept of 60 is that's the cutoff for discernment. But now we're saying we're saying that you're not discerning. So
it's, put it this way, it's not you can't discern it, but it's there. So when you have 60, then it's indiscernible if you theoretically could have discerned it. That's what the 60 does. I want you to skip down a bunch of lines. So far the Shach gave a few nafkaminas where we would concede to Rava. Yayinesech, Tevel, Truma, Arla. That's one category of where Rava's guidelines would apply. A second situation is in the world of Rabbi Yehuda that min b'minai is aser b'mashuhu. And then if you skip down, I'm gonna have the regular Shulchan Aruch. Let's see if I could tell you in yours. Inami. Okay, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 lines from the bottom on page 13. Inami le'inyan davar sheyesh lo matirin. There's a din of davar sheyesh lo matirin. We're going to speak about it at length in Siman Kuf Beis. Davar sheyesh lo matirin means that something which eventually will have a heter is never going to come batal. So let's say you have an egg that's born on Yom Tov and it gets mixed up many eggs. That egg will never become batal, because why have it now on Yom Tov and allow it through bittul? Just wait until after Yom Tov when the egg is not muksa anymore. The halacha is that davar sheyesh lo matirin is not batal b'minai. So how do you determine minai? Does minai go by name or does minai go by flavor? So to that also, the machlokes Abai and Rava and Avodah Zarah applies, and we'll go like Rava, that it goes by name. Inami le'inyan davar sheyesh lo matirin deloi batal b'minai dazlina basar shma v'loi basar taima k'mash shekasav l'kamansim kuf beis. Skip. Aval le'inyan shar yisurim da'asurim b'shishim, but any other isser like heter and mutter, like treif and kosher, when it comes to other yisurim, ule'inyan nishbach midairaisa drabanan vaday dahakoil tali betaima. Everything will depend on taste, and it will not depend on the name. So we have a major machlokes between the Shach and the Ramah. Like I mentioned before, the Nesivos paskins like the Ramah. The Pri Megadim says the Iker is like the Shach, and most Achronim say Iker is like the Shach. That's how we paskin. Okay, that it's dependent on taste. It's not dependent on name. Okay, fine. So that's the first issue over here. Now we come to one of the most exhilarating lamdas in all of Shulchan Aruch. Okay? Fasten your seatbelts. Here we go. Next case. What if, so we discussed two cases. Isser falls into Minai, and you don't know they're Shishim, Savik Draban L'Kula. Isser falls into Einoi Minai, and you don't know they're Shishim, Savik Daraisa, L'Chumra. What if it fell into Minai and Einai Minai? And you know there was Roiv, but you don't know there was Shishim. So Legabe the Minai, Savik Draban L'Kula. Legabe the Einai Minai, Savik Daraisa L'Chumra. So what a good case, what a great case. Yeah, it's an unbelievable case. It's worth the while for your soul to come down into this world just to think about that case. Coming down, the neshama comes from under the kisei hakavod to olam hazeh, just to ponder the case of basar nevela that fell into basar shchuta and roitev. You get the case? Nevela meat, and shechted meat taste identical. There's no difference between nevela meat and, so you have a treif hamburger falls into kosher hamburgers and gravy. And now it gets spilled out and you don't know if there are shishim. So now, into the treif hamburgers, it's min b'minai. And you know there was a roiv, we're dealing with a suffix derabanan. But now the gravy, you're dealing with a suffix d'oraisa, because if it wasn't shishim, it was noisein tam. How do you view that case? Heichi nedaina daina lahaydina. Yeah, you got the story? It's a great story. You know, imagine you're coming out of Shachris and someone said, you heard the story about the flying hamburger? A hamburger flew out of Guy was going through a drive-through at McDonald's, and you were across the street, you were in Kosher Delight, Alav Shalom, and the hamburger went flying from McDonald's into your pile of kosher hamburgers and gravy. And now what do? You know there was roiv, but you don't know there was shishim. And legabe the hamburgers, it's suffik derabanan, and legabe the gravy, it's a suffik deraisa. So let's see the mechaber, okay? Because this is really going to be based on a Gemara, and the only thing is the Gemara is talking about a totally different case. This case is not discussed in Shas. That's how interesting this case is. The Gemara does not discuss this case. Okay? So you're zoicha to think about a case that Ravina and Ravashi did not discuss. You know who the first one who discussed this was? The Rashba. The Rashba. Can you imagine? The Rashba went through the whole Talmud Bavli, and he said, how come they don't discuss this case? They discuss a backward case, the converse case. Let's read the case. V'im nesariv b'minoi uv'sheinoi minoi. If it got mixed in minoi and einoi minoi. V'nishbach, and it got poured out, b'inyan shein yichayim lamed olav, that you cannot evaluate, l'sharei, to estimate, v'noida shahaya rubai, and you know it was a roiv, rubai heter, miminoi. You know it was roiv miminoi. Now what do? Regarding minoi, it's a suffik d'Rabbanan. Legabe einoi minoi, it's a suffik d'Iraisa. Royin as she'einoi minoi ki'ilu einoi. We put the einoi minoi to the side. We make believe it's not here. Now let's just deal with the minoi. The shar minoi rabba olav, and the rest of minoi overpowers it, umevatloi, and is mevatel. Okay? So we're going to put the einoi minoi to the side, and we're just going to think about and ponder the minoi, the treif hamburger into the kosher hamburgers. It's definitely roiv. The question is there shishim? Okay, so I don't know. It's if there was definitely roiv, midairaisa mutter or aser? It's mutter. But was there shishim? Do you need shishim? You need shishim. Is there shishim? It's a suffik. So we should say suffik d'Rabbanan l'kula. But what do you mean regarding the roitev? Maybe it gave taste. No. We put the roitev away. We don't think about the roitev. We make believe it's not there. We just deal with the minoi. The minoi, there is roiv in the minoi. You know there was roiv in the minoi. You just don't know if it was shishim. So we'll deal with that first. We'll say suffik d'Rabbanan l'kula, and then okay. So now that the basar nevela is not there, because we could say suffik d'Rabbanan l'kula, it didn't ruin the einoi minoi roitev. That's the halacha. Whose halacha is this? The Rashba. Now the Rashba was a Rishain. What did he do for a living? He learned Talmud Bavli. And based on learning Talmud Bavli, he was able to extrapolate to cases that are not in Talmud Bavli. What did the Rashba not do for a living? He was not in the business of prophecy. He did not prophetically just say halachas. So that means if the Rashba is saying this halacha, he must have derived this from Shas. He didn't just have Hashem didn't come to him, Vayomer Hashem el Rashba, this case, and this case is mutter. So we're in what does it say in Talmud Bavli? You ready for the case? It's amazing. All the Mechaber gives us is the din of the Rashba. Where'd the Rashba get it from? A Gemara. But you ready what the Gemara says? The Gemara says the exact opposite case. The Gemara, listen very, very carefully. The Gemara is in the world of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds, min b'minoi is not even bato b'mashu. And the Gemara tells a story of a McDonald's hamburger that falls into kosher delight hamburgers and gravy. Same story. Now, a little bit different. The gravy was 60 to be mavatel the non-kosher hamburger, which is good because min b'she'eno minoi, you need 60 to be mavatel it. How about min b'minoi in the world of Rabbi Yehuda? Min b'minoi, you can never be mavatel it. So the Gemara says, what would be if a treif hamburger falls into kosher hamburgers and gravy in Rabbi Yehuda? So the Gemara says, what would be? I'm going to tell you what the halach is. The Gemara says openly, the treif hamburger becomes batel in shishim in the gravy, And now that it's batal in the gravy, so it's like the treif is batal, and now we say, but it asered the kosher hamburgers because min b'mino is not even batal be'elef. No. We make believe the kosher hamburgers are not here. You know why? Because we already mavatal the treif. So says the Rashba, if in the world of Rabbi Yehuda, you could take the treif and ignore it and make believe it's not there. Why? Because we say it became batal in the einoi minoi, and by being batal in the einoi minoi, it thereby saves the minoi. Likewise, let's extrapolate in the world of not Rabbi Yehuda, where min b'minoi could be batal, and the bigger problem is min b'she'einoi minoi, in a case where you know there's roiv, but you don't know that there's shishim, and so what we could do is, when a treif hamburger falls into kosher hamburgers and roitev, what we could say is, it became batal in the kosher hamburgers, even though we don't know there were 60, but misafek there were 60, and then we could ignore the fact that there's roitev here, because just like we ignore the minoi hamburgers in the world of Rabbi Yehuda, we could ignore the einoi minoi roitev in our world. That's the logic of the Rashba. The Rashba takes the case of the Gemara. The Gemara's case, again, is in the world of Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara, there's an added detail that you have 60 in the roitev. So just like 60 in roitev is mavatel the treif, and then we could say the minoi hamburgers are not here, so don't you argue with me. What do you mean? But min b'minoi is not batal. You're right, min b'minoi is not batal. That's when you have treif, but you don't have treif here because it was already batal in the roitev. That's what the Gemara is talking about. Says the Rashba, likewise, not in the world of Rabbi Yehuda, when min falls into minoi and einoi minoi, and the problem is with the einoi minoi, and we don't know if there's 60, the min could become batal in the minoi, and then we make believe the einoi minoi is not here because we have no isser to worry about. The minoi already became batal. That's the Rashba's extrapolation based on Talmud Bam. The Rashba said, I don't do prophecy. I don't need to, I'm not a prophet. I'm a Talmudist. So you say, Rashba, but the Talmud doesn't talk about that case. Rashba says the exact same thing. Same thing. What the logic of ignoring, basically what the Rashba says, Talmud Bavli shows me that if something falls into two substances, and one of the substances could take care of the problem, then the substance that can take care of the problem will remain good because we put it to the side, because the substance that could take care of the problem takes care of it. And once it takes care of it, then it doesn't cause a problem to the substance that can take care of the problem. So, what difference does it make if we're dealing with Minoi and Rabbi Yehuda and the Einoi Minoi takes care of the problem, or if we're dealing with Einoi Minoi in Siman Tzadiches and the Minoi takes care of the problem? That's the Rashba. That's solid. I didn't read it inside. It's better. It's even what we did outside is better than reading inside. That's the Rashba. Okay.
I remember seeing that as far as Yehuda is concerned, he learned it from Xeris and Kosmos by the Dam, and he's going to only apply it in the cases that are similar to the case of Dam. So therefore, it won't apply when it's mixed with min, the minoi, and ein minoi. But that's how Xeris and Kosmos is not relevant in this case, which is about Tam.
You know too much. I'm keeping it. I said over the Rashba good. That was a good rendition of the Rashba.
Simple question. Can I ask a simple question?
Yeah, simple questions I could deal with. Yeah.
My son-in-law and I have a simple question. How do you do that? How do you just what mechanics does the Rashba forget that the Gemara?
Okay.
How do you mavak the suffix of Isa?
Okay, let's deal with the Gemara and then let's deal with the Rashba. In the Gemara's case, the mechanics are very simple. A treif hamburger falls into gravy, 60 times the size of the hamburger, and kosher hamburgers. So the gravy, through the process of bittul b'shishim, is mavatal, the treif hamburger. Once the gravy is mavatal, the treif hamburger, now you want to say the treif hamburger should cause problems with the kosher hamburgers because in the world of Rabbi Yehuda, min b'minoi is not batal. You don't have a treif hamburger here. it already became batal in the 60 times Einoi Mino, the gravy. Likewise, says the Rashba, that when a treif hamburger falls into kosher hamburgers and gravy, and you're not sure if they're shishim, but you know there was roiv in the kosher hamburgers, so the roiv says the treif hamburger is mutter midairaisa. The possibility of there being shishim in the kosher hamburgers says that it's mutter midrabanan, and then the treif hamburger cannot ruin the gravy because it's like the treif hamburger is not here; it already became batal.
Would it matter if you know, I'm not talking about Rabbi Yehuda, but would it matter if you know that the meat is not batal b'shishim? Like,
If you knew, if you knew there wasn't shishim in the minoi,
b'she'eino minoi is batal b'shishim, and therefore you're saying that it will nullify it. So
that's the case of the Gemara.
But what if the meat is in this case, in this case?
In the Shulchan Aruch's case?
The Gemara's case.
The Gemara's case is different than the Shulchan Aruch.
Right. Okay. So, but one of the cases, one of the meat is not. You know that it's not batal b'shishim.
In the Gemara's case, it has to be where there's shishim. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem, not just with the mino, with the einoi minoi.
Right. So the gravy is batal b'shishim, but the meat is. You know for sure it's not.
Yeah, but the gravy is mevatel the meat.
But why choose to go to the gravy to nullify it when you know that it could?
Because we once it falls in, we could say there is something here that deals with the problem. So it problem solves. The gravy problem solves. That's the chiddush of the Gemara. Okay, comes the shach, and the shach says, Rashba, you're a great man. The only problem is your extrapolation is not similar to the case of the Gemara. You know why? Because in the case of the Gemara, what are you dealing with? You're dealing with the world. Maybe this is what's your first name, Mr. Grumberger?
Harry.
Rabaran. In the case of the Gemara, what's the problem? The problem is it's almost similar to the way the Shach explained where Abai and Rava apply and where they don't apply. In the world of Rabbi Yehuda, what's the problem in the world of Rabbi Yehuda? The problem is min b'minoi is not batal. Why is min b'minoi not batal? Okay, it's exeris hakasav in the world of Rabbi Yehuda. Min b'minoi is not batal. But when the treif hamburger falls into the gravy, it is batal. And now you say, but it's a problem. It's not going to become batal in the kosher hamburgers. You're right, it's not going to become batal in the kosher hamburgers. But we don't have a treif hamburger to deal with because the treif hamburger already became batal. A treif hamburger doesn't become batal in kosher hamburgers. But we don't have a treif hamburger. The treif hamburger already became batal in the gravy. Okay? Fine. So we've navigated this biblical problem that min b'mino is not batal. Why? Because you have no davar isser. The davar isser became batal in the einoi minoi. But says the Shach, I have a question for you. Let's apply this to this case. You have a treif hamburger that fell into kosher hamburgers. Do you have shishim? I don't know. You have gravy here. Did the treif hamburger give taste to the gravy? It may have. It might. Did it? I don't know if there's shishim or not. Well, if it might have given taste, you know what you call that? Suffik d'oraisa. That's a suffik d'oraisa. It might have given taste. How could you learn out from the case of the Gemara? In the case of the Gemara, we're dealing with Rabbi Yehuda's, supernatural isser called min b'minoi is not batal. Okay, min b'minoi is not batal. So treif hamburgers do not become batal in kosher hamburgers. But we're not dealing with the treif hamburger here. You know why? Because it became batal in the gravy. So once it becomes batal in the gravy, now the kosher hamburgers don't have to navigate a problem that a treif hamburger fell into it. But how do you apply that to a case where a treif hamburger in our world of the Shulchan Aruch fell into kosher hamburgers, where we know there's a roiv, but we don't know if they're shishim. Since you don't know if they're shishim or not, you're right, it's a suffix. But did the treif hamburger give flavor to the gravy? Did it give flavor to the gravy? Did it give flavor? Could somebody please tell me? The answer is we don't know. Why?
No. So if I have a roiv of Mino and the roiv is kosher, so
but I don't.
Flavor was not the non-kosher.
But I don't know. I don't know if I have the shishim.
I have roiv. I know I have roiv.
So
I have roiv of the kosher min. The Mino, I have roiv that's kosher. So I can say Achar Rabban Lahatis. So then what gave the flavor? To go Achar Rabban.
So the Achar Rabban Lahatis says it didn't give flavor, or it just says it's mutter, or it just says it's mutter, or it just says it's mutter.
Same thing as the shishim by Rabbi Yehuda's case. What's anything less than Rabbi Yehuda's shishim?
Because in the world of Rabbi, okay, I'll tell you why. Because in the world of Rabbi Yehuda, we're not dealing with flavor. We're just dealing with mutter and aser. So therefore, we could learn from the Gemara. The Gemara says that the einoi minoi is mevatel, the roitev is mevatel the treif meat, and it matters the treif meat. So once it matters the treif meat, so it gives a heter. So now we don't have to deal with the isser of min b'minoi. Because you see, in the world of Rabbi Yehuda, we're not dealing in logic. We're just dealing in isser v'heter. So basically what happened was, the roitev mattered the treif meat, and now we don't have to navigate treif meat into kosher meat. But in the case of the Shulchan Aruch, all the min b'minoi did was it mattered it. But does it also render it that it didn't give flavor? Isn't there a possibility that it gave flavor? So you could start saying lamdasin, which, by the way, the Taz says, well, just like we view the treif meat that falls into the roitiv as if the treif meat is not there, and therefore the min b'minoi is permitted because it's like the treif meat did not fall in to begin with. Likewise, in the case of the Shulchan Aruch, let's say, since the treif meat fell into minoi, and there's roiv, and there's suffix shishim, and that's permitted, so it's like it didn't fall in, and if it's like it didn't fall in, then you don't have to deal with the problem that it causes with the einoi minoi. So that's the Taz feels it's compellingly analogous, that the Gemara's case is compellingly analogous to the case that the Rajva applies it to. However, the Shach says you could drive a hole through the difference. There's a very significant difference between the two cases. In the Gemara's case, we're saying put aside the Isser. You know why? Because all we have to deal with is Isser v'heter. But in the Shulchan Aruch's case, we have to deal with more than Isser v'heter. You got to deal with flavor. If you have to deal with flavor, who says that this lumdus of make-believe the Isser is not here applies even in a realm of flavor? Take a look at the Shach in the Nekudos HaKesef. Here, we have to read the Shach inside, okay? Sivkata and Ches. The Shach says, "V'im nesarev b'minoi u'v'sheinoi minoi. Be'emes tzarachian b'din zeh dahatur. B'shem harajba." Really, there's a big question on this din, because the Torah in the name of the Rajba, Hoitzi din zeh, he extracted this din, mimaydam rinan, from the fact that we say in the Gemara, Royin es minoi ki'ilu einoi, we make believe the min, the kosher meat is not here, lahakel, v'she'enoi minoi raba alav, and the she'enoi minoi overpowers it, umevatloi. This is in the case of the Gemara, Laman da Islay, according to the opinion that holds, min b'minoi loy batal, ad kan l'shayna. Says the Shach, v'loy dami klal. Our case in Shulchan Aruch is not similar at all to the case in the Gemara. Da hasam b'minoi lav v'nei sein tam asar. There, when treif falls into minoi, it's not asar because it's nice sein tam. Hilka chaminan. Therefore we say, royin es minoi ki'ilu einoi. We view the min as if it's not there. Dahan nisbato b'she'enoi minoi. Aval hacha, but over here, eich noimar, how could you say, Royan eshe'enoi minoi ki'ilu enoi? How could you say we view the enoi minoi as if it's not here? Seif, hashta noisein tam b'she'enoi minoi. What do you mean we view it if that's not here? You're right, acharei rabim lahatoi. So in terms of isser v'heter, it's permitted. But does that mean it doesn't give taste? It might be giving flavor. V'imkein have a sveika d'oraisa. Dilma loy hoya samach. Maybe you didn't have 60. V'nasan tam. And the Marshal also asks this question. And even though I know the Rashba seems to equate them, you could drive a truck through the case of the Gemara in our case. Therefore, says the Shach, I want to tell you something. As I mentioned, the Shach wasn't a prophet. The Rashba wasn't a prophet. The Rashba never said the Einoi Minoi is mutter. What the Rashba meant was the Minoi is mutter. The Einoi Minoi is going to be asar. The kosher hamburgers will be mutter. In the case of the Gemara, the gravy is mavato the treif, and then the kosher hamburgers are mutter. Everything is mutter. But in Shulchan Aruch, all the Rashba meant to say is we ignore the Einoi Minoi, and the Minoi is kosher. But the gravy is going to be treif, because it's a suffix d'oraisa. As we said, the Rashba was a Talmudist. He wasn't a prophet. The Gemara doesn't talk about this case. And therefore the Shach says, I maintain, the Rashba, if he would walk into the room, he would concede that Einoi Minoi is aser. Venirali, the Gam Harashba v'animshach machav loy amru ela lahater es Minoi. Wow. That's the Shach. But the Taz, we're going to start from in middle of the Taz. The Taz, by the way, quotes the Rashba. You read it on your own in all your free time. Then the Taz quotes the Marshal's Kasha, which is the identical question of the Shach. In other words, is really the case of the Gemara identical to the case of the Shulchan Aruch? And let's read the Taz's answer. In my opinion, the word of the Rashba is correct. Ubrurim, and it's clear. When the Gemara in the world of Rabbi Yehuda, do you see where I am in the Taz? Let me find it. Let me tell you where I am.
Page 14.
Page what?
14. First verse.
Page 14, 1 to 14 lines up. That which the Gemara says, Salek es minai, remove the min. Hainu kugain basar shchuta, basar nevela, v'haroitev. V'yesh beroitev, samach neged habasar nevela l'chod. You have 60 in the juice against the nevela alone. And you should say the basar shchuta yehayasar, the basar shchuta should be asar, because kiven shu minoi ima iser. It's the same min with the iser. Uva minoi loy mahani bitol samach. In the world of Rabbi Yehuda, then we don't say bitol b'shishim by minoi. Afilu hachi loy amrinon kein. Never, we don't say this. Ela kiven she'ein b'basar shchuta iser ela machmas hataruvos. Since the basar shchuta is only asar because of the mixture. Achshav amrinon. Now we say salek es minoi haheter, remove the min which is mutter ki'ilu einoi, v'lo yazik lo hataruvos, and then it won't be damaged by the mixture. Kiven shabato b'samach ha'isser b'roitiv, since the isser is batal in the 60 of the gravy. Have a ha'isser commanda lesa. It's like the isser is non-existent. Ve'ein kana filu blia b'mashu, and now the kosher meat doesn't have a blia b'mashu. Ve'imkein hu adin mamish. This would be the identical halacha l'didan for us. Sheminoi batal beroiv min haTorah. Minoi is batal min haroiv midaraisa. Ve'enoi minoi besamach. Enoi minoi needs 60 midaraisa l'kol yama. Ve'nesariv basar shchuta nevela. Shechted meat got mixed with nevela meat. Veroitiv and gravy. Ve'en kan samach levatal hanevela. You don't have 60 to mevatal the nevela. Nimsa sheish kan heter levater iser bebasar shchuta mitzad shehu roiv kenegdoi. it comes out that you have a heter to be mevatel the isser in the shechted meat because the shechted meat is roiv. Uvamina mahani roiv min Torah. It's just ela sharoi lesser haroitev mitzad she'ein by samach neged isser. We should really ask her the juice because you don't have 60 in the isser nimsa shenoisim by tam. Lazamrinan. For this we say the chashvinan laroitev. We consider the roitev. It's like the nevela never fell into the roitev. Why? Kivan shekvar batla hanevela machmas riboy minoi. Since the nevela became batal because you had a roiv of min, the hava command delesa. It's like the isser nevela is not here. Ulaheter mamish nechshav isser legamri. You see, the Taz is saying, Reb Aaron, similar to the words that you were saying, the Isser becomes completely mutter. The Isser becomes completely mutter. Now the Shach would say that might be the case, but there still might be some taste transfer. So you can't bring a raya from the Gemara. You're right, the Isser is transformed to Heter. Keinu min Torah, that's biblically. The rabbis required 60. Afa Mino, al ken kan sheish safek im haya shishim be'enoi minoi negado iser, and you can't determine. We leave it on the diraisa that minoi is bato b'raiv. Now, a few things. The Shach in the Nekudas HaKesef says, this lumdus that the Taz is saying, the Taz's father-in-law already beat him to it. We know where the Taz got this lumdus from. The Taz got it from the Bach. Kfar Kosev Kena Bach. But says the Shach, I already told you, the Adayin Kasha, Minayin Lanu Lahamtzi Heter. You cannot extrapolate this from the Gemara, because in the Gemara, all you see is that Isser becomes mutter, and then you don't have to deal with that Isser anymore. But you don't see that it doesn't give flavor. Kivan Deloy Dami Klal. It's not similar. V'yesh tam nachain lechalek beinayam. There's a very compelling difference, namely, Nirgash Hatam. The tam is discernible. Comes in a Sivas. Okay, this is extra credit. And he defends the Rashba. He says, really, the taste is discernible? What happened here? The treif hamburger fell into the kosher hamburgers. It's b'daraisa bato b'raiv. You don't know if they're shishim. So now what are you going to say? You're going to say that if there isn't shishim, then it gave flavor to the einoi minoi? So the Nesivos HaMishpat says, what, you think only the treif hamburgers are giving taste to the gravy? Don't the kosher hamburgers, they'll also give taste. And what's the majority taste? We know there's a roiv. So roiv taste going into the gravy is kosher taste. Yeah, but you need shishim. Do you need shishim midaraisa or midrabanan? In the min b'minai, you need shishim midaraisa. In the einoi minai, you need shishim. In the mino, you need shishim midrabanan. In the einoi minai, you need shishim midaraisa. But before the taste gets to the einoi minai, doesn't it become batal? Because you have roiv, and you might have shishim. So what do you say? But tam kickers, the rice is giving a flavor. It's not the only thing giving a flavor. The kosher meat is also giving a flavor. So before that flavor is transferred, why can't we say that roiv of the taste is kosher, and there might be shishim, so it becomes batal? That taste that you're worried about, why can't we say it becomes batal? The Badei HaShulchan says that he feels that Nesivos' defense of the Taz and the Raja is very compelling. But he says, L'maisa, it's a suffix d'oraisa, it's very hard to be mekel against the Shach. Okay, so here's what you need to know. Sif Beis in Shulchan Aruch quotes the Rashba, that when Isser falls into Minoi and She'enoi Minoi, we could ignore the Enoi Minoi, because the Isser becomes Batal on the Minoi, and the words of the Shulchan Aruch seem to be saying everything is Batal. The Shach says not so fast. The Rajba only meant to say the Minoi is good. He never meant to say the Enoi Minoi is good. The Shach doesn't say he's arguing on the Mechaber, so presumably the Shach is saying the Mechaber would agree with this. The Mechaber is only talking about Minoi, the Mechaber is not talking about Enoi Minoi. The Taz learns the Rajba Kipshutai. The Taz feels that not only are the words of the Shulchan Aruch should be taken at face value that Minoi and Enoi Minoi are mutter, but we paskin like the Shulchan Aruch, and there's a compelling logic to paskin like the Shulchan Aruch. Anyway, that's one of the very amazing pockets of lamdos here in Siman Tzadi Ches. And it's 9:15, and you thought now the shiur is over. Nice try. No, we started late, so we're continuing, okay? So even though you're tired, but we got to do this, it's like, what are we going to do? We're going to end the shiur? So we have to finish this Sif Beis and Sif Gimel, okay? We're not going more than 9 more minutes, okay? So here we go. Just bear with me. Here's another interesting question. Remember we said that by min b'she'enoi minoi, if you know there was roiv and you're not sure if there was shishim, what do we say? Safek daraisa le chumra. But what if the min b'she'enoi minoi was milk into meat? Okay, so that's min b'she'enoi minoi, and that's safek daraisa le chumra. What if it's milk into chicken? What if it's milk into chicken? What? Now we know milk into chicken is d'Rabbanan. So would we say, it's a suffix? We know there is roiv. So medaraisa it's batal. It's only now it's a suffix d'Rabbanan. Even if you don't know there was roiv, even if you're mesupik if it was roiv, it would still be a suffix d'Rabbanan. So we have a very interesting machlokes Shach and Taz. Well, I'll let you read it inside. I'm going to tell you what the Shach and the Taz hold. The Shach in Sivkatan Zayin quotes the Torah's Chatas, who's the Ramah, by the way, and the Ramah quotes the Isser v'Heter that if milk falls into chicken and it gets spilled out, since tam ke'ikar da'iraisa, we have to be machmer. So the Shach says, Riboina da'alma kula. Tam ke'ikar da'iraisa. Straight up milk into chicken is only an Isser d'Rabbanan to begin with. So it's very nice, tam ke'ikar da'iraisa. That's when we're dealing with meat. But when we're dealing with chicken, it's an Isser d'Rabbanan. The Ramah and the Torah's Chatos did not quote and understand the Isser v'Heter correctly. Everybody knows that Isser v'Heter holds milk and chicken is an Isser d'Oraisa. That's why the Isser v'Heter says that if you're not sure if you had shishim or if you had roiv, you have to be machmer, because the Isser v'Heter personally holds that milk and chicken is an Isser d'Oraisa. But we know, I'm sure everyone here knows that we hold milk and chicken as Isser d'Rabbanan. For those who were with us for Bas V'Chav last year, in the beginning of Siman Pei Zayin, we came out, milk and chicken is an Isser d'Rabbanan. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, the Shach says, the Ramah made a mistake in his quoting the Torah's Chatas, in his quoting this v'Heter. This v'Heter happens to hold milk and chicken as Isser d'Oraisa. We hold milk and chicken as Isser d'Rabbanan. Therefore, if you're mesupik, whether you have roiv, whether you have shishim, safek d'Rabbanan, l'kula. Safek d'Rabbanan l'kula. Good? So the Shach argues with the Ramah and the Torah's Chatas. The Taz says no, the Ramah is correct. It's true, it happens to be true that the Isser v'Heter personally holds milk and chicken as Isser d'Oraisa. But don't you remember? I have a question for you. If you eat chicken, could you drink milk 10 minutes later? No? No. If your mother's Jewish, you can't drink milk 10 minutes later. Why? It's gzera l'gzera. Well, what are we worried about? If I'm not allowed to drink it 10 minutes later, because you might do what? You might cook it, And big spiel, if I cook it, it's only Isser D'Rabbanan. So it's Gzeira L'Gzeira. So what did we learn? It's Kula Chada Gzeirahi. When it comes to chicken, the Rabbanan treated it like a Doraisa. Are you allowed to eat, could one guy eat milk and one guy eat chicken nuggets on the same table at the same time? No. The same way milk and meat you don't eat at the same table at the same time. Chicken also. What do you mean it's Gzeira L'Gzeira? No, the Chachamim upheld their view when it comes to chicken. They treated it like meat. Therefore, the Taz says the Ramah and the Taras Chatos is correct. If you're not sure if you had shishim or roiv against the chicken, we would treat it as if it was a suffix d'oraisa. Okay, now I want to tell you, the Taz is found tucked away at the end of Sivkatan Hey, and I'm going to read to you the one line at the end of Sivkatan Hey where the Taz says this. The Taz says, like 3 lines before the end of Siv Katan Vav, Al ken gam bezeh roy lahachmer ba'oif gezera atu nishbach bebasar behema. That you need to be machmer by basar oif, a gezera, you might, in a case where it spills out, by basar behema. Now, 2 points that the Taz brings toward the middle of Siv Katan Hey. You know, the case of the Shulchan Aruch is treif meat fell into kosher meat and gravy. So what do? It becomes batel in the kosher meat, and then the gravy never has to deal with the Taaruvos. Yeah? What would the halacha be if the treif meat first fell into the gravy and you don't know if there were shishim? And then it fell into the Mino. So then you're toast. Then you're toast. Because it fell into the gravy. It's min b'sheino Mino. You don't know if it's shishim. We say the whole thing becomes aser. We say the rule of chaticha nasas nevela. The eino Mino becomes aser. And then you're going to need shishim in the Mino connected the whole thing. Okay. Sif Gimel, I'll tell you outside, we'll read it again next time inside. Sif Gimel talks about, until now we're talking about where the mixture got spilled out. So there was no human way, no one could humanly determine whether there was 60 or not. But what if you have a genius where you have Isser fell into Heter, and this Goy Notzam is staring at it, and he doesn't know if there's Shishim or not. So you say, pal, so why don't you measure it? He doesn't know how to measure. Is that a suffix? In other words, other people could know. He doesn't know. So is that a suffix? So you say, oh, that's ridiculous. Let's say you say most people can't know, but there's a guy who has a special measuring tool. He could figure it out. Is that a suffix? You see, nishbach, when it pours down the drain, it's not possible to ever recoup or retrieve how much was in the mixture. But what if it didn't spill out? It's just the person doesn't know. So the Shach says a very important rule. The Taz also says that if just this guy can't determine, it's called das shoitim. It's das shoitim. Who cares? He can't determine. So what? He can't determine. But it's determinable. It could be determined. So we're not going to say that it's, even if it's min b'minai, and it's a suffix d'Rabbanan, you know there was roiv, and you're not sure if there was shishim, but someone else could know that there was shishim. That's not a suffix. That's the lumdus of the Mordechai. The Ran says a little bit of a different lumdus. The Ran says, the Shach brings us, he says, Safek hatoli b'chisar yediyah. We'll read this inside next time. Loi mikri safek the das shoitim huzah. The Ran says a different thing. If every time a guy personally doesn't know the answer to a question, we're going to treat it like a suffix, then every single shaila in the world would always be mutter. I don't know. And it's a d'Rabbanan, so suffix d'Rabbanan. So you need to ask someone who knows. Otherwise, the Chachamim had to have some uniformity in halacha. They couldn't just say, whenever people don't know, we're going to call it a suffix. But when it spills out, that's not a typical case. That's only ba'akroi. So it's okay for us to say, okay, we'll be make on that case, because it's not a typical case. Okay, we'll discuss, we'll review again, we'll read inside Sif Gimel. Today we did Sif Beis, and as Hashem, we'll see everybody again next Sunday night. Shkaya.
Thank you.
Back to you. Back to you. Thank you. Okay, good night everyone. Shkayach. Good night. Yeah, Machlokes Shach and Taz by the Eino Mino, that's like that's the meaty stuff. Okay, good night everyone. Let's
they really are bad to not do this. We're gonna, might be oral too. I'm scared.
okay. Let's troubleshoot this. Let's restart it
Yeah.
and see if it's a Wi-Fi issue or it's the computer.
Wait, no, but are you gonna do the update now, or are you gonna do?
I'm gonna do the update now.
Update's gonna take like 10 minutes.
Yeah.